Imuslin. I'm an alcoholic. It's been an excellent conference. I think I know all the speakers. I've heard them many times, probably more than most of you. Tommy, I've known since the day he got sober, a long time ago, 37 years ago. And he has really done a remarkable job in sobriety. I'm going to hear his tape next week. I'll hear it on the freeway. And, of course, our other speaker this morning, Sharon, who I remember sitting behind her, and it must be the first time she came to Ohio Street. But there's a girl with her jaw wired shut. I leave. I said, "Welcome to Club." And after hearing Sharon talk many times, I've been looking for that wire. Tomorrow morning speaker, of course, Tom is a great inspiration to a great many people, fine speaker, fine AA, good member, if you like killers. Not really. Tom is really a fine AA, good man. Good man. I'm really glad that when they told me he was speaking tomorrow morning, I made a special point there was some talk whether I'd have to leave, and I said, no, I want to stay here and hear Tom tomorrow. So I'm going to be here and enjoy it. And because a couple times recently we've been someplace, and he spoke on Sunday morning, I had to go somewhere, and it just irritated me very much. But I'll be here tomorrow morning enjoying it. And I'm very pleased to be here. I want to congratulate the young lady who's 6 days sober. It makes you feel good to see somebody 6 days sober who looks healthier than I do. And this rain has been bothering me. I was in Chicago yesterday. I had a talk there Thursday night, and I had seats right behind home plate for the Chicago Cubs New York Yankees game yesterday afternoon, and catch the evening plane down here. It rained. I waited for months, and then it rained, and as soon as I got to the airport, and they said, well, the game's starting now. So they played the game, but I don't care. And most of all, you get a good trip. I was thinking when Sharon was talking that a few months ago, you were speaking in Iceland, weren't you? And I spoke to her last year, and that's what you call a bad trip. It's about 500 miles beyond any length. And I mentioned this before in a couple other meetings, but I might as well mention it here too. Deserve to hear it. On the way back from Iceland, I was tired and cross, and I got stuck in Minneapolis, had a 5-hour wait between planes through some triumph of booking, and I was sitting in the red carpet room, tired, across Sunday night, and I had to go to the bathroom, and in the red carpet room, they have two little stalls side by side, very attractive and clean, very neat, and I was sitting in the stall just thinking about things, and all of a sudden a voice comes from the next stall. Hi there. I went back to my book. Pretty soon, after a while, the voice said, what are you doing tonight? I thought I better quell this now. So I'm going back to Los Angeles to my wife and children and grandchildren and great-grandson who lives with me. We're a very closely knit group. Thank you very much for asking. There was a long pause, and the voice said, we could really have some fun if you wanted to tonight. And I afraid I got a little cross. I was tired. I said, I don't know what your orientation is, pal, and I don't, whatever it is, I'm happy for you. But you keep your orientation, I'll keep mine. Now let's drop it. There was a long pause, and the voice said, I'll have to call you back. This idiot the next door won't shut up. very glad to be here tonight. I'm glad to, because we are here to gather together, as we always do, to share our experience, strength, and hope with one another, to discuss our stories, to hope that some modicum of identification will allow you, newer people, to stay here. Because after all, that's what keeps people here, is identification. Because there isn't anybody in this room who hasn't had enough advice to last them for 5,000 years. And after a while, it just becomes information, pointless information. They talk about Star Wars, where you can shoot down rockets. I can shoot down advice in midair. Just, thank you. Don't even hear what they're saying, but nod. And we all can do that. We've been hearing it because the thing that swells up in people like me, I suppose, is this. I know you mean well, but you don't understand. You don't understand. My case is different. And that's a denial, boy, I'll tell you. And I know all my life I've been troubled. Another thing I've been troubled by is that I know people who seem to drink as much as I ever did, and they quit. And they're held up to me as an example. Why don't you quit like Fred? I don't know. Just leave me alone. And it took me a long time in my life, after I was sober some time and reading a lot and discovering a little more things. I'll tell you, if you're kind of new, this may puzzle you too, but I'm going to tell you something. There seem to be types of alcoholics. Who would guess such a thing? But there are types of alcoholics. There's a type of alcoholic who by any measurement is an alcoholic. They drink, caught up in it. But something really dramatic happens, perhaps a death in the family or a divorce or a threat of a divorce or a lost job, something that really captures them. And all of a sudden they realize the chaos in their life is, I quit! And they never drink again. There's also a variation of this type who are recovered through treatment centers, or not only psychologically addicted, but become physically addicted, and they must be medically withdrawn. These are the people for whom treatment centers were originally created, for medical withdrawal. And these people, each step of the way, see the chaos that's become of their life, and they just overcome. I quit! And they never drink again. In fact, a very famous hospital in Seattle, the Shea Dill, advertises, because they deal with people like that. They advertise in 7 days, we can cure your alcoholism. But then there's another type of alcoholic who drinks by any measurement, seems to be an alcoholic, and something drastic happens, a loss of a job or a loss of a family or a death in the family, something that really captures their attention, and they quit. But they always eventually begin to drink again. And there's the same type withdrawn from the treatment center. They quit. They know it's wrong and they quit. But they eventually always begin to drink again. Bill Wilson talked about that type. He didn't know about the types of alcoholics. But again and again in the book he talks about alcoholics of our type. These are the type who continue to drink again. And they've always been a bafflement to science and to religion and to people who try to help it, and probably most drastically to the family. I bet there isn't an alcoholic in this room who hasn't seen that look on someone who loves them, that look of disappointment. How could you? You were doing so well. Look at you. Why did you do this? And there's no answer to that except, leave me alone! Because I don't know either. But it makes me feel awfully bad, but you'll feel sad. And this type of alcoholic, not a very big percentage of the drinking population, but these people have created a great turmoil over thousands of years. At one time they thought they were possessed by devils. They put them to death. And they would flog them and lock them away and send them away. England used to send them to Australia, to the United States, what is the colonies. And in this generation, in my lifetime, Dr. Jung, this famous doctor in Austria, told Roland, I believe you are an alcoholic and there is no effective treatment for your condition today in the world at any price. There was no hope for anybody. And somehow we lucked out and got into the only window ever in the history of mankind where people like us can go. But this is a baffling thing, and most of us don't make it by far. According to the most recent figures of the National Institute of Health that I've read, they talk about all the sobriety. I mean, we know about all the sobriety in the United States. There's sobriety all over the world, of course, but there's most in the United States, and more than any place ever. There's more sobriety in this room than there's in AA after 10 years. And it's just wonderful, except in America where there's AA everywhere. There's nobody to ever drink again. You have to have any great thing, you just go to AA. It is estimated that about 95% of alcoholics in America still die drunk, or as a direct result of drinking. And I'm sure they all die saying the same thing. But you don't understand. I'm not really an alcoholic, not the way they are. And that is the puzzle, that great flag. My case is different. My case is different. And that is the killer, in my opinion, of all the things that happen here. Let me tell you something in passing that make you feel a little better, now that I'm telling you the bad news. I discovered a couple years ago, and I believe this to be absolutely true, because the source I got, is that when Roland, this fellow that went to see Dr. Jung, he was much troubled, and his parents were very wealthy in 1931, and they first contacted Dr. Freud. And Dr. Freud refused to treat the guy. So they went to Dr. Jung, and that's one of the best things that ever happened to you and me, I'll tell you. We'd be sitting around here tonight discussing sex in our dreams. Those of us were sober. Oh, yeah, I had a dream last night, boy. Had 2 wet dreams and had another one, I fell asleep. I'm sorry I said that. We take that off the table. And it's amazing because once you're sober a while, it seems so easy. Now, most of you know that I'm in a situation different than probably anybody here. When I go to work in the morning, I get up out in West LA by the ocean, and I drive downtown and drive through Beverly Hills where I used to work, and I keep going down to, and I park my car, and I get out of my car, and then I have to step over the bodies of men and women dying from alcoholism and drug addiction to get to my office. And I spend the day working on people like that, not trying to get them sober, but just trying to keep alive. Then I go home at night, and I step over the bodies of men and women, sometimes children, lying on the sidewalk, dying from alcoholism and drug addiction, and get in my car and go home. And maybe you think, well, why don't you help these people? You're supposed to be, and it's successful AA, you're active in sponsorship, why don't you help these people? And I used to do it all the time. But I came to the reluctant conclusion, and I talk to these people and want to say, why can't you get this? Look, I've been on this sidewalk, and I know this situation, and listen to me. But finally I had to realize, if sobriety could be transferred by good wishes of street talk, we'd all be home free. If it could be transferred by the efforts of good men, why did I slip year after 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 year? And I don't like to hurt as much as anybody else, or any more than anybody else. I'll tell you, I hate to hurt. And if I could have found anything here that I thought would have helped me, I would have done it. But I knew that my case was different, and it got more pronounced as the years went by. And I came to AA as kind of a medium, low, high bottom drunk, and was kind of a medium, high bottom drunk, living up and down, up and down, up and down, and finally wound up a low bottom drunk. The last day I drank, 2 big guys threw me out of a Skid Row mission in Los Angeles and said, "Stay out of here, you bum." And I tried to explain to them, I'm not a bum. 3 years ago, I was on the faculty of the University of Texas. Ads that I wrote, the LC and Elmer, as for the board company, were running that very weekend in Life and Time and Saturday Post, New Yorker. I've had my picture in the New York Times for one of my achievements. How many people do you know have had their picture in the New York Times? But it's really hard to explain these things in midair. When I stood outside that mission on a cold, rainy morning, rained then too, and I didn't feel very well. And I've said this many times, I don't know a better way to bring it about. If some old guy came to me that morning and said, "You know, Slim, you're dying. You're down to 120-some pounds. You've lost your wife and children. You'll never see them again. You've lost your career. Once upon a time you were described as a boy genius. Now you can't even get a job washing dishes. You've lost all your clothes when you got arrested in Phoenix." And I had lost all my clothes. I had dirty, torn clothes on. And I remember that night because that night a guy in the Phoenix jail got cross with me because I'd lying on the floor and he felt I'd vomited out his bunk and he kicked my front teeth out. So I had no front teeth. My mouth was swollen and bleeding. He look at you. You couldn't get a job doing anything. Nobody wants you. You got old, dirty, puke-covered clothes on. If you'd have said that, you're an only child, and your mother up in Wisconsin is no longer allowed to accept phone calls from you anymore because your stepfather's so tired of watching you work out her emotions. So she'll go down to her tiny bank account and take out a few more dollars and send them to you and hope that'll make you better. Now, you've been going to AA off and on for almost 10 years, and you sit in these meetings and think how different you are and smirk at these simpletons and their little steps and all these things, and now you're dying. If you'd have said, why don't you go back to AA one more time and see what happens? Admit you're an alcoholic. And if he'd have said that, I'd have to say, pal, you don't understand. I'm not an alcoholic. I wish I were. I would be glad if I was an alcoholic, but I'm not. And he might have said, well, prove you're not an alcoholic. I wouldn't have been able to do that. I wouldn't have had the objectivity to stand back and delineate the differences. So I probably would have had to do what people like me do when we get cornered and we're afraid. And you have to have a defense, and the defense is bluster. Get away from me! Get out of my face, you son of a bitch! Leave me alone! Because I don't want them to know I'm afraid. But I couldn't explain why I knew I was an alcoholic. I know now. I could see it very clearly. Because I had been in and out of AA for many years. And I knew it. I heard all about it. I just couldn't stay sober. I knew what an alcoholic was. If you're new tonight, this young lady, 6 days sober, I'll tell you what it is. You know it already. What alcoholics are. Other people whose problem is alcohol, and they're getting away from God, and you've got to come to AA and admit you're an alcoholic, then return to God, and then you show your gratitude by helping others, and your life flourishes. You hear nothing but good things from the people. If you go to a speaker meeting, we'll say the speaker meeting at Phoenix Group Saturday night, for the next year, you will hear 52 different speakers. They'll all have different stories and backgrounds and experiences and interpretations, but one thing will be a thread that runs through their talks. It may not be said in exactly this way, but it's always there. I used to drink and my life was terrible. I came to AA and got sober and cleaned up my act, and now I'm feeling better. Everything else is just local color. And that's the one thing I could not accept. I wish I could, because I don't know why I had to feel such a sense of integrity about admitting I was an alcoholic. But very simply, I drank. I can give drinking stories to anybody, because I'm kind of a bizarre drinker. I'm kind of a loud, flamboyant guy, and I get in trouble. I've been in jail a lot. No big felonies, nothing like that. Just overnight a lot, because I have a tendency to counsel police officers when I drink. Sometimes I prevent unjust arrests and go in their place. I've been in jail. I've been in, I can always go to AA and talk drinking stories to anybody. And I can talk AA with anybody. You want to know about AA? Chicago, Minneapolis, New York, Dallas, El Paso, San Francisco. I can give you regional differences. But the one thing I can't overcome is this. Unlike alcoholics, is when I get sober and clean up my act, that's when my life gets painful. And the longer I stay sober, the worse it gets. And these people talk about they can't quit drinking. I can quit drinking, and I've done it any number of times, with and without good reasons. But the one thing that affects me that doesn't seem to affect anybody else that I ever heard of, sooner or later, in a day or two or a week or two, or sooner or later, somebody sneaks into my bedroom in the middle of the night and puts an invisible spring in my gut. And the next day they start to tighten it. And I just start getting a little restless and a little irritable, a little tired of being treated like a child by people who I'm supporting and people who I'm making look good, and a little irritability, a little crossness, and a little resentment. And I've learned over the years that there's one thing that cuts that, and that's 2 or 3 drinks. And eventually I drink them. And I don't know how to explain to people. I don't drink because I'm a drinker. I drink because I'm a feeler. And I don't know how to explain that, but I know when I drink, it makes things look different. And sometimes I drink too much again. And then they say, oh, you got a drinking problem. You ought to go to AA, do something about it. And you have to listen to such advice and say, gee, thanks, I'll do that. But inside of your voice just wants to shriek, but you don't understand. Nobody understands. I mean, I know I've got problems. I've known I've got problems since I was a little boy. There always seems something missing in me. I don't know what's missing, but other people seem to recognize it. When I get close to people, it almost seems to me they don't accept me like they accept other people. They see something different in me. I don't know what it is. And I don't seem to fit in. I don't feel comfortable fitting in. And I feel set apart somehow. And I feel inferior to I'm beneath a lot of people, and I hate them for it. And I'm superior to some people, and I have contempt for them. But I don't feel equal to anybody. I would say that if I could, knowing what I know now, looking back, my life is, these emotions weren't there all the time, all of them, they'd come and go. But the one thing in my life that was constant, it's as though if you're supposed to be like this in life, my life has always been like this. I don't know why. Just something off all the time. Something off. And the one thing when I grew up, I wanted to do something about it. I thought, what I can do, I went to psychoanalysis. A lot of people say you shouldn't go to psychoanalysis. I loved psychoanalysis. I found out things that had happened to me I never dreamed had happened to me. I'd been hurt by the Depression. Didn't even know there'd been a Depression until I found out about that. I was raised in the Norwegian Lutheran Church. Very nice church up in Wisconsin. Kind of strict, but you don't know it's strict. That's all you know. It is kind of strict. Our dropouts become Southern Baptist ministers. Or something. I don't know exactly. It's kind of it's pretty generally, I hear people say things like, I've been searching for God for 30 years. I never searched for God 10 seconds. When I was 2 years old, I discovered where God is. He slowly circles the Our Savior's Lutheran Church in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And he gives it to sinners, and he gives it to Catholics. And that's all right with me. And you have these 10 big ones, and you hope if you break at him, if you break 2 or 3, you're kind of on the cusp. And you break 4 or 5, you might as well just turn it in then, because it's over. And I wasn't a bad kid. I just seemed to need more fun than other Lutherans. And by the time I was 12, I knew I was in deep trouble. And I discovered in psychoanalysis that I had been repressed by the Norwegian Lutheran Church. I'd like to find that out about your own church that repressed you. I discovered all sorts of things. But I used to feel good. I remember going to see Dr. Hurley and feeling good. Later on, I used to wonder why that was. And I really couldn't understand why, because all you ever got was bad news. But it was good. You come out afterwards and say, God, you poor guy. But after I was sober a while, a guy I sponsored was got into the adult children of alcoholics. Not the Al-Anon version, but the commercial version. I don't know much about it. And he's on, oh, yeah, it's great. He said, Mike, you want to come to a couple meetings with me? I said, sure. So I went to a couple meetings. And as I sat there and listened to these guys talk, I discovered why I liked psychoanalysis and why I had liked it. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you, of all the emotions I know that's effective, guilt, deep-seated guilt is as bad as any. And that's a suicide disease, eventually. Guilt is just terrible. Not only guilt of the things you've done, but the guilt of the things you shouldn't have done and didn't, and sins of them. It's just on and on. And it's just hideous. You can't get rid of it. When you drink, you can get rid of it for a while, but then you get sober again, and it's even worse. It's just on and on. Now, what would you think of a therapy that could get rid of guilt? That'd be nice, wouldn't it? Get rid of guilt. And that's what psychoanalysis did for me and what adult children of alcoholics was doing for this guy. Now, I don't know if it was meant to. I don't think that's the concept of psychoanalysis in my reading of it, but that's what it did for me, or the adult children of alcoholics. Perhaps I don't know. I'm not attacking the philosophies. But what it does is this. It convinced him and convinced me that we were victims, that we had been failed by those around us, that people who we should have loved us didn't love us enough, didn't take care of us, didn't understand us, perhaps not out of malice, just failed us, who would, at moments of crisis, and supportive, and on and on. And as you listen to that over a period of time and realize this, what happens is this: you begin to realize it really wasn't my fault. It was their fault. If they had treated me well, I'd have been all right. I think the epitome of that is the movie On the Waterfront. There's a scene in the back seat of the guy's car. He's talking to his brother. He said, "You know, Jimmy, you should have taken care of me. You're my brother. I could have been a contender." And when I saw that, I had big tears in my eyes. Yeah, I know that feeling. And I'll tell you what it does. It gets rid of guilt. Because when it's their fault, it is no longer my fault. So you might think, well, what's wrong with a therapy like that? I'll tell you. Probably there's just a little couple. You should realize when anything like that happens, there's always a little price tag. You don't always see it at the time, but you can see it in retrospect. There are 3 little price tags for victimization. Victimization is a delicious feeling. But there are 3 little price tags you see later. What are the price tags? First of all, you must accept and enhance feelings of resentment toward those who have failed you, who have failed you again and again sometimes. When you go to those meetings, there's no laughter in those meetings. That is intense, resentment-filled meetings. The second little price tag you have to pay is that you must accept the fact that you are irretrievably different. I mean, you've been made different. There's no coming back from it. I remember hearing one of their guys talk about it, and he said, "We are like trees. When we were saplings, someone reached within us and tore out our hearts. It didn't hurt us physically. We continued to grow, and we like all other trees. But we are without hearts and souls." And the third little price tag you pay, and if you're like me, you certainly understand it, intermittent but intense self-pity. God, I almost made it again and again. If I'd have had some breaks, I would have made it if people would have treated me, you know. And I think, well, these are inconveniences, but to God, to get rid of guilt, maybe they're worth it. And maybe it is for most people. But when I got here for a while, and stayed around here finally, I ran across something funny in that book, Alcoholics Anonymous. It lists the 3 most lethal emotions for people like me: resentment, feelings of difference, and self-pity. And why are they so lethal? Because they will justify every drink I take till I die from it. And it will never have been my fault. And you don't understand. Now, don't misunderstand me. I know a lot of people have bad childhoods. I had kind of a bad one. And terribly bad childhoods. And it's a sad thing. But you come to AA finally, and we are very fortunate, because you stay here a little while, and you may come to understand a great fact that will change your life. Sooner or later, you come to the realization here, as bad as it was, that was then, and this is now. And as Dr. Bob's son, I used to kid him and say, "I suppose you're going to be president of ACOA, aren't you? You're the original one." And he got quite testy about it 15 years ago. He said, "I do not intend to spend the rest of my life playing out the role of a wounded 16-year-old neurotic." And you might think about that, because not taking responsibility for yourself is that victimization is just such an inviting thing, because you can slide right out of it. But here you have to realize you must take responsibility for your actions. But I didn't know that. And I went to psychoanalysis. I read books. I read German philosophy, and that's really great, that German philosophy. Except when people are looking, then you say, "How true." My all-time favorite, I've talked about many times, is a guy named Nietzsche, Dr. Friedrich Nietzsche. He's German, just a terrible, cynical, nasty guy. Never reading him. God, yeah, he understands. Yeah. And you read too far, and you discover he died in the insane asylums. Thinking just the way I do. Well, so you have to backtrack and see what happened. And he wasn't really insane. He just had terminal syphilis. Just a good-time guy like you and me. Just didn't have the magic bullet for him. But one of his characters in his book that I liked, because by the time I was 12 or 13, I knew that if God existed, I was damned. And I always knew I was damned. And that's what I did. One of the kept me away from AA again and again. I'd go to AA, sometimes even stay sober. I'll start talking this God crap. Because if God exists, I am damned. I know that. You say, well, you're grown up, now it's different. But Hitler used to say, you give me their minds till they're 12, and they'll be Nazis till they're 90. And there's a very famous theological seminary in Chicago that has Dr. Nietzsche quoted. It's on the wall. It said, well, what he wrote, his protagonist said in this article, he said, God is dead. Why are you so concerned about God? Perhaps God once existed to set the orbs of the world, but look about you, there's chaos. Natural law is all there is. There's no God intervention. God is dead. I remember reading that and thinking, now that's some good news. I'm glad I got that book, you know. And in this seminary, they have that on the wall that says, God is dead, signed Friedrich Wilhelm Nietzsche, 1884. Unfortunately, right beneath it, it says, Nietzsche's dead, signed God, 1906. But the one thing that helped me the most of all the things, I found an answer to my life problems. When I was 15, I was a neurotic, mixed-up kid. My parents had got divorced. Just, can you imagine this? At the age of 12, I'd never heard of a divorce. Because it never was. Never was. And never one in my church, never one in my family. My parents got divorced. And I instinctively began doing the worst possible thing you could do. And I'd never even heard of a divorce. But I was 12 years old. I was a straight-A student. I'd been shoved ahead a grade and a half in school. I was way ahead of everybody else, still smaller, but I was doing good. And my parents got divorced. And I immediately began playing them against each other to get out of discipline. And 3 years later, I was flunking out of high school. And I outsmarted everybody, and I was dying. And I didn't know what to do, and the war started, and I told my mother I want to go to Superior, Wisconsin to visit my aunt. I was 15, face full of pimples, dumb, and she gave me bus fare to go visit my aunt, and I hitchhiked to San Francisco. I had no idea where the hell I was going. I got there, and got a ride long ways with a guy from the Navy. And I told him I wanted to be in the Marine Corps and go over there and fight in the war. He said, oh, you're too small. Maybe get in the Merchant Marine. They'll take anybody. Because all the good guys go in the Navy. So I went to the Coast Guard office. He said, tell him you're 16. The guy, I want to be in the Merchant Marine. Okay, fill out this application. So, well, you're only 16, kid. We need your parents' permission. So I took it around the block, got my parents' permission. And they issued me seaman's papers. Just temporary ones, but permanent ones later. Sent me to the National Maritime Union. They sent me to sign a waiver for some union dues, whatever they were. And the guy took me to the docks, and an hour later, I was on a ship going to the South Pacific. And it really was fun for about an hour. Kind of went downhill. But it was, just exciting kind of. I still remember the fun of smelling the ocean, being on a ship, and going on the Golden Gate Bridge, going by Alcatraz. Oh, Red Goofa in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. That's really something. And I was stuck in a room. They called it a cabin. But cabins, living in Wisconsin, cabins have logs in them. This was a room. The three guys who were just terrible guys. I remember my first day on that ship, how bad I felt because I was going around like this, it seemed warm, and these guys were talking, and I was lying in my bunk, and I really wanted my mother. I just, and it turned out I was in a room with sinners. I mean big-time sinners. I mean bad sinners. They had been in San Francisco for several days, apparently, hanging around with women, and they were sinners of the first one. I remember thinking, of course, they've all got black hair. Those must be the Catholics I heard about. I mean, as I often say, I don't want to give the wrong impression. Even at the age of 15 in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, I had sex. But I'd been apprehensive, and I'd been afraid, and I'd been alone. These guys were doing it with women. Believe my ears. Among other things that had me in that ship, I mean, these guys would swear and curse, and all just terrible people. And I finally got my role on the ship. I became the ship fool, Hey, kid, go down the engine room, tell me we need a left-handed wrench. Hey, kid, go up on the fridge, tell them we need some elbow grease. And And they would sit around and drink at the end of a watch, and just they weren't supposed to have whiskey, but who's going to stop them? You know, these are just the scum of the earth. And probably one day the guy turned to me with his bottle of whiskey and said, "How about you, Junior? You think you're man enough?" And I drew the line. I might be a little screwed up kid, and I might be a dummy, but I'm a Lutheran basically. And I prepared it just to demolish him. I was going to say, "You big dummy, get that whiskey out of my face. I happen to be a Norwegian Lutheran. I guess you didn't know that, you Catholic. Norwegians don't drink whiskey, and even if I did, I wouldn't, because I promised my mother and grandmother I would never drink whiskey. And I'll just thank you never to put that in my face again." I was just going to lay that on him. He said, "Well, you think you're man enough?" I heard a voice say, "God damn right." So I had my first drink out of the first bottle of whiskey I was ever close to. And I threw up, and they laughed at me. And God, public embarrassment, humiliation, still the worst thing I know. And all the way across the Central Pacific, when nobody was around, at least once a day, I'd stick in one of these IC bags and take a drink of whiskey, and I'd throw up, and I'd wipe it up. But I was so desperate to have them think I was a man. Nothing I would have done would have made them think I was a man, because I wasn't, but I didn't know that. Remember we were coming into Pearl Harbor the night before my 16th birthday? Remember that? And I'm down there taking a drink. I'll tell you something. I saw that movie Pearl Harbor a few months ago. Terrible love story. But they had recreated Pearl Harbor the way it looked as World War II, just exactly. They were still digging up the Arizona and all sorts of things. And I took a drink of that crap and it stayed down. Then I couldn't breathe. And all of a sudden something strange happened. I found myself feeling significantly better. I didn't think anything about it, because in your teens is when you learn things, you know. On that ship, they all smoked. Nobody in my family smoked, but they all smoked, so I smoked and puked and smoked and puked. And one day I smoked and didn't puke, and I smoked 2.5 to 3 packs a day every day for the next 40-some years. Until I realized it was making me bald. I'll tell you a funny story. Some of you know this story, because it doesn't make me look good, but you might as well hear it. Some of you, Tommy remembers in 1985, I was in charge of the flag ceremony at this international convention in Montreal. I was screaming on the field, and this guy from Poland making me crazy. And but anyway, they finally got it. And when I got back from Los Angeles, I couldn't get over the hoarseness. I thought I hollered too much, but 2 weeks later, I was still hoarse. I went to the doctor. He said, "You have a growth on your vocal cords. We have to take them out right away." And so they went in and took out my vocal cords, or took out 1/3 of them. And then I couldn't talk for a while. I was talking to someone here the last time I saw him. I could, with a period of not speaking. And I didn't know if I could ever talk again. He wasn't sure if I could ever talk again. And it was really scary. And the doctor said, "You know, Mr. Imuslin, smoking didn't cause this, I don't think. But you do smoke a lot. I would suggest that you stop smoking. You might go mute." For 5 years, that guy had been telling me, for you to continue smoking the way you do is to die. Don't smoke. Yeah. He only had to tell me once, "You may go mute." And I never smoked again. But I learned, they taught me some techniques for indulging my lust. They never worked, but at least I had techniques. It's the Norwegian Lutheran approach, which is, "Do you wanna?" That's why there's not very many Norwegian Lutherans, I'll tell you that. But I didn't, the next day they took me to Honolulu and got me 3 or 4 bottles of beer, and I got drunk. They thought it was funny. I thought it was funny. It was no big deal. I didn't become a terrible alcoholic. After that, I was around for a while and drank a little bit. I learned, the next few years to try to learn to drink what I liked to drink. And I didn't know it was a special effect. All I knew, it made me feel like a man. That's all. And many years later, I stood in the Skid Row, and somebody says, "Why do you drink?" I could give them psychiatric reasons, psychological reasons. But I guess the number one reason would have been, if I'd known, it makes me feel the way men look, and nothing else that I know does. Nobody came up and talked to me in that old Skid Row. It was raining, and I was sick and desperate. And I had a terrible feeling. I didn't know what the feeling was. I know what it is now, and I'm sure some of the people in this room have had it. But you get to a point where you suddenly realize there is no friendly direction. There's no place to go, no direction to go where they're going to be glad to see me. And that is a frightening, terrible thing. So I thought I'd better get to another one of these stupid AA clubs and get off the rain and pretend I'm an alcoholic. And I had to walk 72 long blocks in the rain to this AA club in Wilshire and Fairfax. I went in there and same old thing, and steps on the wall, and traditions, and turn it over to God, and live and let live. And I just lurked all day. That night they had a meeting, and I had about 4 pounds of cake. That's what I could eat. And they talked about gratitude at the meeting. I almost puked it up again. And I had no place to sleep that night. And everybody went home up to them. I thought I better put on my newcomer look and do something about this. I went to the manager. I'm a newcomer, and I had no place to stay. He said, "You're luck, kid. A guy named Joe Quinn from down the beach left an old 49 Merc in the parking lot last summer. Doesn't run, but you can sleep in that." I said, "You want me to sleep in an abandoned car?" He said, "Yeah, good deal, huh?" I said, "Yes, thank you very much." I slept in a band car that night, and I remember that still. My mouth bleeding, I was sick and cold and hungry. And the next morning I got up, it was Sunday morning, went to this damn club, and it's Sunday morning now. They had a morning meeting, I ate cake, and they talked about God or Jesus or somebody I didn't want to hear about. And that night there was another meeting, and I went to that, slept in a abandoned car, it's still raining. I remember thinking, maybe I'm dead. Maybe I'm dead. Maybe this is what I get for marrying a Catholic. And I had no idea that would be my sobriety date then or thereafter. I had no intention of getting sober, because to me, sobriety is something beyond belief. I always had the feeling, for many years I'd had the feeling, if I could ever find a reason strong enough, I could quit drinking. And most people feel that way. If you can find a good enough reason, you'll quit. But I had such a good reason. As I say, I used to go to jail out overnight. Just one night, a guy came down in the morning and get me out of jail. He said, "You should have been home last night." Yeah, I know. He said, while you're out drunk, your little son died, and we couldn't find you. Oh, my God, that just made me crazy. Not only his death, but the conditions I would be in jail. And I just couldn't stand it. We went up to Wisconsin to bury him. I remember the Sunday before the funeral on Monday, and I sat in the living room with my 2 brothers-in-law, big farmers, nice guys. My father-in-law, nice man, farmer. They took, "Here, Clancy, have some more coffee. You want a little pastry? Here." But you could just see in their eyes, "You dirty bastard, look what you've done to our sister. Here, have some more coffee." And the next day when we buried my son, I put my hand in my casket, and the casket nobody's watching. I said, "John Imuslin, this will never happen again in our family. Your death will be the goal, make it right for everybody else." And I went back to work, and it was like after Easter. There had been a death, but for the benefit of everyone else. And for a while we had a good kind of, my daughters, we started to play together. I'd take them for rides on the road, and I'd go to work, and I liked my job, and we had pleasant memories of John. We'd talk about it, we had some pictures of him. And everything was perfect, except one night, somebody snuck into my bedroom and put an invisible spring in my gut. And the next morning, started to turn, just a little resentful, a little edgy, little resentful and discontent. Now coupled with something even bigger, self-pity. I lost my little boy. What kind of a stinking God would kill my son because I'm a bad man? You filthy dirt! And just little by little, it just mounted. My daughters, who I was doing it for, pretty soon, at night, their noise. "Mary, take your sisters and go to your room. Come on, I will play tomorrow, Juliet." And just hate myself, but it didn't. And I knew if I could just have 2 or 3 drinks, I could ease it off. But taking a vow in your son's casket, you can't take 2 or 3 drinks. And one day, my wife took the kids to Mass, and I drove home and put the car in the garage, hooked up a hose and exhaust pipe. Till the morning, went to sleep and died. And it just happened to the neighbor who was sitting in his breakfast nook having a cup of coffee and watched this. And noticed the motor kept running. I didn't come out, so he ambled over and found me dead in the car. And pulled me out and beat my chest and breathed my mouth and rushed me to the hospital, determined I was seriously mentally ill, and committed me to the state insane asylum in Big Spring, Texas for an indefinite period, up to the rest of my life, I suppose. Now that's how I get when I stop drinking. That is not an alcohol problem. There's something wrong with me. In the book, they call it grave emotional and mental problems. So when I heard that, I knew who they were talking about. And the inability to be honest with myself. I don't know how to explain that to anybody. Now, for me to get sober is to commit suicide or just run away. And yet here I am sober. And I've thought about that many, many times, looking back. What was the difference this time? A lot of times I wanted to stay sober. This time I didn't want to stay sober because all it would lead to was horror. And I look back and I think what saved me this time, if I put it in one sentence, this is the first time I sunk so low I let some of these stupid AAs tell me what to do. I thought I was selling out. This is the absolute end of my integrity, letting these idiots tell me what to do and pretend to be interested. But I didn't want to go back outside in that rain and die. And I don't mean taking steps and making amends. I mean small things, like, for example, the manager of the club told me that this is a membership-only club in the daytime. At night you can come in the meetings, but you're such a mess. You can come to stay around here in the daytime if you sit in the front row of the meetings every night. So I sat with him. And in those days, there weren't any styrofoam cups, hadn't been invented. All porcelain cups. And so after every meeting, somebody had to wash them. And the old-timers got sick of washing them. So they're looking for some stooge to do it always, you know. You're there, boy, with up front seats. You want to wash our cups tonight? If I had any strength left, I'd have said, no. I want you to wash your cups tonight or tomorrow night or next week. Why don't you lick them off with that long, ugly tongue? But I knew if I did that, I'd be in the rain. I remember standing there watching. I remember baking. I remember washing dishes. Everybody gone home, and I'm sitting there thinking, how could I come to? I wouldn't even hire these guys to mow my lawn 3 years ago, and here I am. I didn't drink any coffee at that meeting for a while. The other night, a guy said, "We need somebody to help mop. How about you, kid? You want to mop?" Probably the worst of all is I still live in the parking lot. I said, "We need someone to help us up at the meeting tomorrow night. How about you, kid? You live right here on the property." But I somehow stayed sober. Just I thought I was dead, I guess. But what happened eventually? They began hollering at me like they always do to all newcomers everywhere, fanatics, you know. Here, got a sponsor. Time to get a sponsor. Bring a sponsor. I'd see this actor coming in out of the. I used to be my sponsor, because I thought maybe give me some money. He looked like a goof. And I found out later he didn't like me. And I'll tell you why he didn't like me, for a very good reason. I was a smart-aleck newcomer. I know of no worse than smart-aleck slipper. God, smart-aleck slippers are terrible. Yes, I know all that. Don't bother telling me how to use it. Oh, shut up, you know. But he tried to help me, and he'd take me with him to hear him talk a couple of times, and he'd talk to me. And somewhere along the line, I heard him, when he was talking, and I heard him say something that startled me. He said, my problem, it took a while to realize my problem was not alcohol. And that saved me. This guy is not an alcoholic. And yet he's running a scam on AA, and they all think he's wonderful. And I developed a begrudging respect for him. And the result was that I began doing things he told me, not because I thought they'd work, and I thought AA was stupid, but I wanted him to like me. And if you're new, let me tell you something. One of the great facts about AA is this. The actions here don't care why you take them. You may be sincere and dedicated and be a wonderful person and take them, you'll get better. You may be a brown-nosing sneak and take them, and you'll get better. It's a great thing. And little by little I got better, and I started doing things, and he wasn't very easy on me. I said, Bob, I'm 3 weeks sober. I'm living in the back seat of an abandoned car. People who I wouldn't even hire are ridiculing me in meetings. They talk about me, make jokes about me, and write notes about me. What am I going to do? I can't live like this, Bob. I look terrible and I feel terrible. He says, get a job. I said, get a job? Look how terrible I look, Bob. He said, get a terrible job. I I thought it was just a terrible thing, my survival. But I look back now and I think probably the greatest thing that happened to me in my life happened to me in those first 3 months or so. I didn't know it at the time. It just seemed like I stumbled onto something. But if you're new to it, you might want to think about it. You might think, well, when did this old fool become an alcoholic? Was it alcoholic I drank? Was it alcoholic I got sober? I'll tell you, my sponsor, I wouldn't want to run this all night long, but my sponsor finally convinced me over a period of time of the most important thing of all. I explained to him, I can't be an alcoholic, Bob, because my problem isn't really alcohol. I wish it was, but it isn't. I can't take the first step and admit I'm an alcoholic, because I wish I were. My life would be so much simpler. He said, kid, what does it say in the first step? Where does it say that you admit you're an alcoholic? Well, it doesn't say it, Bob, but that's what it means, and you know it, and I know it. Try to fool some idiot, not me. He said, why don't you just try the black parts on the page for a while, kid? He said, we admitted we're powerless over alcohol. You think you're powerless over alcohol? Not really. He said, what do you think powerless is? You hear these guys talk, they get drunk and they hold up banks and rape nuns and fly over Hong Kong. And I'm just a good guy about this and victimized my whole life. Because I don't think that's what it means at all, kid. He said, let me tell you, among all the drinkers in the world, maybe 8 or 9%, who knows how many, get an unnatural reaction to alcohol. What do you think that unnatural reaction is, kid? Guess it makes them stay drunk and do crazy things. I said, well, he said, no, that's nonsense. That's podium talk. It's much deeper and more subliminal than that. And this percentage of people get this, you know what the unnatural effect is? Alcohol must do something special for you that it doesn't do for most people. It must almost instantly alter your perception of reality. It must almost instantly change your relationship to the world around you. It must, I think David Pat was talking, it fills holes you didn't even know existed until you filled them up. I said, yeah, so what? What's the big deal about that, Bob? He says, it doesn't do that for most people. I said, it doesn't? He said, no, that's why you're in this meeting and they're not. Well, what's wrong with that, Bob? It makes you feel good. He says, because little by little you come to depend on this artificiality. And then even that isn't so bad, but eventually it turns out that eventually this does this for you. You get to a position where you don't know what's going to happen when you start to drink. I thought, oh, Jesus, Bob, that's silly. You know, I drank a lot and I didn't go crazy things. Sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't. He says, it doesn't mean that. It means that people like us, it's like playing Russian roulette when once he begins to do it for you. Every time you drink, it's Russian roulette. And when you're young and strong, sometimes you win a lot of games, you know. Click. What a night last night. I got in about 5 o'clock, just barely got to work. Click. God, that broad chased me right through the bar and out the door. I don't know if I was terrible. Click. I'm staying out of that lefty's bar. That's a bad place. But as you get older, some sinister force puts more and more shells in that baby, that's all. And you wind up like you, kid. Gee. Jeez. There's a click in here somewhere. All you got to admit is that you don't know what's going to happen. I said, Brad, he said, you may have 3 or 4 or 5 drinks and go home and go to bed. You may have 3 or 4 or 5 drinks, go to Mexico. You may have 3 or 4 or 5 drinks, fall in love with an 89-year-old woman on a walker and stalk her. I said, yeah, I understand that, Bob. I've done that, but I didn't mean that. I mean that. She said she was 85. But I tried to explain, but Bob, that is not the reason. You don't understand this. I'm not like these alcoholics. It isn't because my alcohol is so bad that I have bad life. I have a bad emotion, Bob, and that makes me drink. I don't drink because I'm a drinker. I drink because I'm sober life is bad. And drinking isn't what makes my sober life bad, so I'm not an alcoholic. So why don't you read what it says, kid? We admit we're powerless over alcohol, dash. In the English language, that means end of thought, beginning of new thought. Now you must also admit your life's unmanageable. Do you think your life's unmanageable? Not really. He says, you're living in the parking lot out here, for Christ's sake. And I explained to him, I said, no, don't cry, for Christ's sake, be a man. He said, let me tell you something. Out in Malibu, the richest man in America, in North America, maybe in the world, goes to AA meetings 3 or 4 nights a week. And he can afford to buy all the treatment centers and all the hospitals and all the doctors and all the counselors and all the psychiatrists. And instead of that, he goes to sit in AA meetings. Why do you think he does that? Beats me, Bob. He says because he has discovered he's an alcoholic, and it turns out that is the only therapeutic that makes the alcoholic sustain any degree of comfort. He said, what you got to understand is this, kid. We all get born. We all have emotions. We start to grow up. In our teens, usually we have conflicts and crises and make mountains out of molehills and terrible times. And this is called maturing. That's a human maturing process, working through crisis and conflict and deciding what's important, what isn't. Many of us, some of us here certainly, haven't had to do that because bad times come when you're a kid. You get a few drinks and get around it. And you don't have to go through that crisis. You have to work through that conflict, that painful, endless conflict. You have a few drinks and you get away from it. Something else happens, but at least that's gone. And that's all very nice until you get drinking badly. Then you got to get sober. Now you get sober, and all of a sudden it's very unpleasant here. Why? You don't know why. I'll tell you why. Because there's a school of thought, which she said, I believe, and I'll tell you today, I believe that when alcohol begins to work, your maturing process stops. So you wind up with grown-up body, grown-up brain, grown-up abilities, grown-up slickness, grown-up glibness, grown-up everything, and never knowing that you're all at the intermittent beck and call of childish emotions. We call them alcoholic emotions because it makes it sound a lot better. But they're childish emotions. Think what alcoholic emotions are. You hurt my feelings. I love you. I hate you. I'm not going to that meeting anymore. Schoolyard emotions. And eventually it gets very painful. And eventually, you have to get rid of the pain. You have a few drinks. Outside of rooms like this, no one would believe that people would drink to forget their drinking. And yet we all do it. You don't really do that. You have problems, so you drink to overcome the problem. Then you drink till you have to stop. Then you stop till you have to drink. Then you drink till you have to stop. Jesus, Bob. He said, the only smart thing you've said today, you said your problem isn't alcohol. And it isn't. I said, it isn't? What is it? Oh. He said, it's something called alcoholism. Oh, Jesus, Bob. Don't play word games with me. I may be down and up, but I'm very intelligent, I'm a good writer, and I'm a smart guy. Don't play word games with me. Save that for the idiots. I'm not playing word games with you. I'm telling you the facts of life, kid. An alcohol problem, which we all think we have to start out with, is overcome by stopping drinking and cleaning up your act. And that's all there is to it. However, in this strange thing called alcoholism, which to the naked eye looks exactly the same, this mind-consuming, perception-distorting, bodily eroding thing called alcoholism, you'll discover sooner or later that stopping drinking and cleaning up your act has no significant long-term effect on your life other than to gradually make it so painful you can't stand it. Some psychiatrists feel that the point comes to alcoholics, and I believe this to be true, where you literally have to drink to preserve your sanity when it gets bad enough. Then you drink till you get sober. Then you get sober till you drink. Then you drink till you get sober. And the one thing that's always present in your mind, but it really isn't the drinking. It's all this other stuff they don't know about. I can't explain it. I'm not really an alcoholic. I'm just a very unfortunate person. That's why most people still die from it. most 95% of people die from it. And I'm sure they die saying, but I'm not really an alcoholic, you don't understand. I said, Jesus, Bob, that's me. He said, there's a name for people like you. Uh-oh. What is it, Bob? He said, you're an alcoholic. And I said, well, I'll be damned. I just spent 10 years of my life and lost everything I had, wound up a bum on the street, my teeth kicked out, merely because I could not find a definition of alcoholism that seemed to fit me. And there it was right in the first step. As it said, not the way somebody interpreted it. If you're new to that, I hope you'll stay away from people who interpret the 12 steps or interpret the book. It means what it says. And that was in January of 1959, and I haven't really had a drink or a pill since. The only therapy I've had is Alcoholics Anonymous. And I only knew all about it when I got here. I saw a psychiatrist a couple times a week for 3 or 4 years, but only because I was his sponsor. I made him go to those meetings. You remember him, Tom? Crazy bastard. I'm not judging him, I'm just reporting. He finally moved away. That made me feel good till Joe came along. And I don't think becoming an alcoholic changed my life immeasurably. I was still an emotional, goofy guy, but I had to learn. But listen, at least I understood what was wrong, and I allowed my sponsor to force me to take those steps. One day I decided committing suicide as I was going to do. I wrote an inventory that I thought I'd never write. And I made amends to people, my father that I hated, and all sorts of things. And little by little, my life changed. And I stayed sober. And it's been the greatest breakthrough in my life to discover I'm an alcoholic. Most people fight their lives against it because they're afraid they won't be able to drink and get some relief. But eventually, you got to come to accept it if you're like me. And I eventually, after a while, I finally had some little jobs, got fired a lot, except me emotional smart mouth. And I finally had a little job. I was 2 years sober, got a little job as a writer and beginning writer. I had more experience than my 3 layers of bosses above me in this medical corporation. But my sponsor made me go to work every day. Jesus, there was he didn't understand it all. Some mornings you have moods, and I talked to him a lot because I had emotional conflicts a lot with people. I don't get along with people. And in the next 3 years, I learned some. You want to play with your little camera, take pictures of yourself later? What is it, Vanoy? This is not an Al-Anon meeting. We try to be respectful here. But anyway. Oh, I tell you, Jim told me such stories about it. But I forgive you. I went to work every day, and in the next 3 years, I learned some of the greatest spiritual lessons of my life. You know, you think, what are the great spiritual lessons of AA? Prayer, meditation? They are. They really are. But let me tell you some others that you might overlook because they kind of get lost. Do what you said you would do. Be where you said you would be when you said you would be there. On time. Don't take out your hostility on people who can't answer back. Children, employees, waiters and waitresses. On days you're having a bad day, watch that tongue, because you can cut people to ribbons and make a lifelong enemy. You never know what the hell happened. Just and a lot of other things. Such dumb little things as if you're pushing a cart through a market and someone's left a can on the floor, you stop and pick it up. By the time I was 5 years sober, I had front teeth at last now. And I was director of advertising for that medical corporation. And in case anybody new here, you may have lost a tooth or two, let me give you hope. Once you become spiritually perfect, you grow back. 6 days sober, she won't remember. She felt like her. When I was 7 years old, another guy and I were brought to Hollywood, and he created the #1 hard rock station in the world, something called Boss Radio. We all wore shiny suits and said things like, "What's coming on down, baby?" I was 10 years sober downtown drinking public relations. When I got me 15 years sober as a marketing director in Beverly Hills. When I was 5 years sober, the same wife and all those children heard the crinkle of green in my wallet all the way to Dallas. Leaped out of their post office box, rushed to my side. 9 months and 10 seconds later, another Catholic at the street. But then I got a book on the rhythm system, which beats coitus interruptus, if you ever tried that. One outcome of coitus interruptus is you get a nervous tic for several years. No, not tonight, honey. And all my children are grown up, and they're all... The last one was a little boy again, so I cried in the hospital. I had my little boy back. And he's grown up, and they're all grown up, and 3 of my daughters are turning 14 this year in AA, and the others aren't alcoholics, so they're not turning anything. And only one of my kids has turned out bad. You hate to talk about things like that because it's kind of shaming, but my oldest daughter has become a judge. I'd so hoped for a defense attorney, but no. She was home for Christmas a few years ago. She said, "Daddy, remember when we were little girls, you used to send us to our room?" I said, "Sure, honey." She said, "When you come to Albuquerque, I'm going to send you to a little room." I have no plans to go to Albuquerque. All these are very nice, but interesting things to come to discover that such a small thing would give me a focus in my life. And when I was 15 years sober, as most of you know, in some hideous fit of misjudgment, I left a job in Beverly Hills, and for the last 29 years, I run the mission on Skid Row that threw me out in 1958. And people say, "Why would you do that? Give up your financially good career to run that damn mission?" And I can never think of a good answer. Well, for such a significant decrease in salary, I thought it must be spiritual. But it's so hard to explain sometimes the purpose of AA, because AA, you think, Jesus, you're so, how sober can you get? It isn't the idea of being sober, being dry. For being dry, Tom and I would burst into flame from spontaneous combustion. We've been dry forever, Him longer than me. They'll probably give him a prize. I'll tell you honestly, I'm always glad to see Tom or anybody else there ahead of me. I don't want to be the oldest one on the block. I want someone there ahead of me, parting the cane brake for me if possible. But the purpose of AA, as it turns out, if you're kind of new, listen to this. It's not to make you sober. Being sober is the entrance to AA. That's not the goal of AA. The purpose of AA and its steps and involvements and traditions and actions and all these things are to very slowly do what alcohol did fast. That's all. To little by little change your perception of reality. To little by little fill holes inside you that never were filled. To little by little change your relationship with the world around you. And it doesn't come very fast. And a lot of times it's frightening and scary. Because, we hear from the podium, and then I became wonderful. But that isn't the way life is. Here's the way it goes. Oh, I found a new life. Oh, Jesus Christ. And that's why we need each other, I guess. And eventually, you do something about this scale. But it's kind of frightening if you're new, because the solution is so dumb you can't believe it. Here's what you do. I got this terrible thing over here. Help me. We're going to ignore that side. We're going to work over here. There's nothing wrong over here. It's that side. Oh, turn it over. And they give you a little bucket of stupid little actions and a spoon. Start going. And one day that damn scale starts to move. And I'm feeling good. Oh, I'm so glad it's over. It's just wonderful. But through some coarse celestial prank, there's a tiny hole hole on that side you don't see right away. I found a new life. And it's just, oh, Jesus Christ. And that's why you got to keep your bucket with you all. And the interesting thing is, once you get below the surface of your malady, you'll discover that you are absolutely similar to the people around you. I've been sober a long time. I've been active all this time. I don't know if I'm goofy, or like Pat said, I don't know if I'm goofy or because I'm doing better. But so I've had the opportunity in the last few years to talk in a lot of strange places, South Africa, Asia, and Australia, New Zealand, and I was in Stockholm a couple weeks ago, and Oslo, and Berlin, and London, and Brussels, and a lot of places. You'd think you'd really find exotic AA in these places, but you really don't. Except for the accents, you hear the same emotions you hear at the Phoenix group or the Chicago group or Dallas or any other group. The same emotion, the same feelings. There are some people who are feeling kind of good, some who are not feeling good. In every group in the last analysis, it seems to me boils down to this. There's a bunch of people who have come there against their will and afraid and desperate and somehow been driven to take steps that has changed their perception of reality little by little. And now they're sitting in meetings on a continuing basis, feeling good. And in every meeting there's a little group of people who will not or cannot take the actions, and they snarl and make trouble and ridicule the people who do and call them step Nazis, and this is all stupid. And in the middle there are new people, and these two groups fight for their souls. And it's really remarkable we hold as many as we do, because the arguments against AA to the newcomer mind are better than the ones for it. You know, they can prove it's a cult, it's just a bunch of nonsense, and all this nonsense. And when you're speaking for it, all you can say is, well, it works, thank you very much. And that's why we have to keep the flag going. The last thing I want to say is this. I said I couldn't return to God. I remember telling Bob, I'll get this quick. I said, Bob, I can't return to God. I just can't return to God. And that second step, I can't do that. I want to, but I can't. He says, it doesn't say you return to God. Oh, to a power greater than myself. Is that what it says, Bob? Do you think that fools anybody got any sense at all? I know what they mean. It says it doesn't say that either. It says came to believe, but never asked you to return to anything. No one's going to ask you to return to sick, distorted perceptions of reality. You've got to come to believe in something. Can't you believe in God? No, I can't, Bob. Can't you believe in AA? Not really, Bob. It doesn't work for people like me. Do you think I'm doing better than you are? I guess so. Congratulations, I'm your new higher power. And he became my higher power. People around the club used to laugh. There's a crazy guy who thinks his sponsor's God. I knew he wasn't God. I knew he was a devil, if anything. But I trusted him and I believed him because I thought he knew how I felt. I identified with him. And I began doing things he told me. And little by little, over a period of time, I started to feel better as a result of those things. I fought against him, but I did them. By the time he died, I had come to believe in AA. In fact, people said, gee, your sponsor died. Is this going to put you over the edge? I said, no. He died drunk because he got mad at AA. He started the Pacific Palisades meeting. They changed the format. He was 15 years sober. He did some other things. He went to work in Sydney, and I said, hell with AA. And he got drunk and died. And they said, you're going to get goofy now. I said, not at all. It just proves what he said was right. He said, you stop doing these things, you get drunk. You stop doing them, got drunk. Kind of exclamation point. But I had come to believe in AA by this time. And then I had to get another sponsor. And there was this, I had to find somebody active, because action is what just kept me going all the time. And the most active man I knew lived in Laguna Beach, but he is such a smarmy old fool. I hate to ask him. But I did. And he never told me what to do once. He just showed me. In the next few years, I began to do the things that look good to him, and that changed my life some more. And somewhere along the line, I remember praying to God, because I hear these old good guys talking about God being a good force. Maybe God doesn't hate me. I remember saying a prayer one night, and I wasn't struck dead. And I eventually came to believe that God loved me, no more than you, no less than you. I had to come to believe for me that God's grace falls on everybody. I've never really been able to understand. I know what they mean, but I don't understand the phraseology. There but for the grace of God go I. That would imply there was no God's grace over there, just not me. And through the grace of God, I've stayed sober. How about the guys dying in front of the midnight mission? Why are they? Don't they get God's grace? Sure they do. I got to believe they all get God's grace. It either falls on everybody, or if he's picking favorites, I'm not going to make it. He said, you can stay sober, you can't, you can, you two can't. Oh, no, I can't make that. I got to believe the chance is there for everybody. When I finally had to come to believe through guidance from my betters, is that God's grace falls on everybody, and my job is to get my crap out of the way so it gets through. And if you let God's grace term bothers you, think of the word serenity. Think of peace of mind. Think whatever it is. And I don't think any human being can sustain it very long, but it's great when you have it for a little while. And so to find that I stay sober through God's grace is almost staggering to me, because I would have died and never understood what the hell was wrong. Remember going back to Wisconsin, taking my mother to Norwich Lutheran Church, thinking, my God, the same God is in this church as in my meeting in West LA. And the other people in this church don't know it. They sit there afraid of God. And I'm not afraid of God. I think God loves me, and if it did nothing else, it eliminated my fear of death. I used to be awfully afraid of death. I mean, I don't want to die, but I'm not afraid of death because there's so many good guys over there waiting for me. Jimmy can get me coffee when I get there. But I really am. So it's just a great thing. I want to start by saying, when I was in the Texas Nut House, I escaped once, and I don't know if you've ever been. West Texas is kind of like Oklahoma. You suddenly realize they can see you running for 3 days. You know, and you're out there in your white bathrobe just. It's just a matter of time till the field glasses pick you up. Well, there goes that little Yankee sumbitch now. And they snatched me back and gave me a couple months of electric shock treatments. And I didn't know that. I really never thought I was going to get out of that nut house. But they put in an experimental alcoholic ward. The first one in the state of Texas was put in Big Spring, Texas, when I was there. And as my sense came back, I realized, I know about AA. I can hustle these guys. And I began to hustle them. I put an application to get transferred. I finally got transferred. I just saw shock treatments, but you know. And I went to my first meeting there. I'd never been to a meeting in that area of Texas. And they did something there. They do it here sometimes, too. But I'd never heard it before. You know, right now you say, my name is Fred, and I'm an alcoholic. But I went to this ward, half goofy. I heard this guy say, my name is Fred, and through the grace of God and the power of this simple program, it has not been necessary for you to drink any alcohol or take mind or sedating medication since my sobriety date. And for this I'm truly grateful. And they said, hi, Fred. I guess that's all right, but when you're just off shock treatment, it's I thought if I ever got in a position of power and authority, and I got some people to listen to me, I'd give them the facts of life. I wouldn't give them some rigmarole like that. So I've come here tonight at tremendous expense and no little inconvenience to give you the facts of life. I've told you how I came to believe I was an alcoholic, how I came. So I'm going to tell you this. Take this home with you, newcomer, if you remember nothing else. Bad girl. My name is Clancy, Imuslin, and I'm an alcoholic. And I've discovered that through the grace of God and the power of the simple program, it has not been necessary for me to drink any alcohol or take any mind-sedating or tranquilizing medications since October the 31st, 1958. And for this I am truly grateful. Thank you. My name is Clancy Imuslin. I'm an alcoholic.